Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Thank
Pleasure,
you.
Marco.
We need labels,
Yeah,
to orientate ourselves.
absolutely.
When we say Zen Funk, what are we talking about?
Well, I labeled it because we need to talk about music, right? And we want to write, we want to exchange about music. And for me, of course, there were many influences where I'm coming from, but these two terms show very directly what's all about. Like meditative flow, emptiness, focus, but on the other hand, very sensual, direct groove and interlocking of rhythms.
How meditation can be helpful in working with music?
I think playing music but also listening is very meditative. Also when we dance, meditative does not always mean like just sitting still, but it has to do with being really in something. And meditation as a technique mainly means to focus on something and be really there, be really here. So, and that helps you to train that, as we know today with mobile phones and 20 social platforms, you're constantly distracted. And to focus on something, to listen, to play, is a very meditative thing, but finally it has to do with communication, that I take you serious and we really are here when we talk or when we are making music.
You studied Aikido also. Very roughly, it can be described like a ritual fight, a ritual dance. What did you learn from it?
Well, first of all, it's a martial art that is non-violent and based on partnership. So you train to be attacked, you never attack, but you work then with the energy of your opponent or partner to not injure yourself, but also not your partner. So you try to do something with the attacking energy. And finally, when you transform that in everyday life, but also in playing music, for example, with a band and with an audience, this is a very fundamental way of treating partnership. So you try to stay connected, you try to really open your ears, you try to listen and to constantly act and be present. And that's what I learned from Aikido, because there you need to train it, you need to do it practically. It's not philosophy in the head, it's like training every week.
How did you develop your personal approach to piano and composition? Which were your main inspirations?
Well, first of all, I was playing drums as a kid. I already liked to play on all sorts of things, like, to make drum sounds and creating rhythms. And I liked very much all music that had a strong rhythm. And through this, I came to the piano by playing boogie-woogie and then jazz, and then developing into Bartók's music, Stravinsky, and also discovering the whole world of music through rhythms and cycles and patterns. And that led finally into a need to make a really focused research about what we can say with this today. So I discovered a lot of modern chamber music, but also a lot of minimal music, but also a lot of groove music, ritual music, world music, and tried to bring that together in my own music to create a composition style that is also living from structure, but also from improvisation and a modular way of treating material. So in all my pieces there is a lot of freedom also, although it has a coherent, clear structure.
But at last, piano itself is a percussive instrument, yes?
Exactly, the piano has many aspects. It's an orchestra, it's a percussive instrument, it's a very mindful instrument, it's an abstract instrument, but it's also very direct in sound. And it's a modern instrument relatively, it's a machine. So I found it very interesting to work with the piano because I could include all my interests for the orchestra, for bands, for groups, for rhythm, but also for playing with yourself, polymetric, polyrhythmic things, and also studying the whole tradition of classical music until the modern music that we know from jazz and all sorts of rock and prog rock music.
Your music can be compared as affinities with the music of some minimalistic authors. Are there any of them that are closer to your music, or any that you find more inspiring?
Traditionally also minimal music in terms of work with patterns interesting. You find that already in Renaissance music or in Bach's music also, for example. But of course, in the 20th century, especially from mid of 20th century, you have the minimalists like Steve Reich and these guys. And I think especially Reich is interesting, although he's going more into a pulsation music, while my music is inspired by grooves and balances of beats. But I found mainly Stravinsky interesting, who is a pre-minimalist in a way, because he worked with patterns, and he also created, not only in the Rite of Spring, but mainly there, a lot of these cycle things already long in advance before a minimalist music came up in classical music. And of course we find that tradition also in a lot of drumming and world music, like actually Steve Reich himself told also. So it's a long tradition. It's more a musical tactic or strategy that I found very interesting. But of course, people like Steve Reich gave it a very clear language and also experimented with that very precisely.
Within a group like yours, Mobile or Ronin, how do you organize the challenge between composition and improvisation? Is there space for it?
Yeah, I mean, when I studied classical music, I started with jazz and groove, but then with 15 I discovered classical music, and finally I studied classical music. And in classical music education, the score is really strictly treated, so the piece is holy and you shouldn't change anything. But I loved certain parts in classical compositions, and I wanted to repeat some parts, and that was somehow not possible. But in jazz, on the other hand, you have a lot of freedom. So you have a piece more as a sketch, and then you start to improvise or to change it. And I wanted to find something in between that respects the piece, the composer, the coherence of the material, but on the other side allows you to work with that, with your composer skills or improvisator skills. And that's how I created this modular music. And you find modular strategies in Stravinsky's music, but also earlier, I mean, like Bach, Mozart, Schubert, they were all good improvisers. Chopin was a very good improviser, so they were able to compose, and at the next day they improvised and changed the piece. So that's actually how music works.
Thank you very much, Nik.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark.